Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Center for Book Arts. Just for everyone that's in the room, we're live streaming this tonight out to our folks on YouTube. Hello. My name is Karina Reynolds. I'm the Executive Director of Center for Book Arts, and welcome into our beautiful book bindery. Tonight's program is presented in partnership with the New York chapter of the Guild of Bookworkers. Woohoo! And we are delighted to present our next program in the Legacy Press series with one of my favorite Center for Book Arts. Can I call you an alumni? Sure. Yeah. Russell Maret. And Russell is somebody who I feel doesn't need much of an introduction because he's just so cool. And many of our artists in residence, I think, agree, including one of them that's in the audience tonight. So just to give you a brief background on Russell, I would say that he is a type connoisseur and expert, an incredible book artist, and some of his work, I would say, embodies what I think is the most interesting about the book arts. It's this perfect synthesis of the idea and the physical object. I mean, those two things, the process, the design, everything about the work that you produce is on point. So while I'm standing up here, I'm going to give a quick plug for one of Russell's upcoming programs. If you are interested in hearing him talk more after tonight, which I know you will be, on December 1st, he's going to be speaking online at the Newberry Library, and he'll be in conversation with the curator Jill Gage about script typefaces. And so you can find out more information about that at newberry.org. Also, we have next week our first in the series of our broadside readings this year, so please tune in for that as well. One other bit of quick housekeeping, and that is to show off this beautiful book, which I don't know if anyone in the audience owns it, but you should. And the reason why is it's almost sold out, so you should get your copy ASAP. It's called Visionaries and Fanatics, and it's Russell's new book by Legacy Press. And at the front desk, we have these beautiful cards. Please take one. It has all the information on where to get your copy of Visionaries and Fanatics. I have one in my library, and you should as well. And so without further ado, I'd love to welcome Russell Maret.
Thanks, Karina. Sorry, a little getting myself straight here. So look in that thing. Okay, it's a little weird, but anyway, thank you. Very happy to be here again, speaking again, and thank you to the Guild of Bookworkers for inviting me, and to Legacy Press for publishing a book that no one else would have published the way they published it. So anyway, tonight, as part of this series of talks by Legacy Press authors, I'm going to basically give a talk version of one of the essays, which is not idea heavy, it's craft heavy. And it's about this amazing typeface used to print the Theuerdank in 1517. And so, but before we get going, how do I forward the, really? I want to make sure that everybody understands what kerning really means in metal type. Kerning is something we take for granted in digital space, but in the metal type realm, it is a physical act of a little piece of a letter hanging off of its physical body and resting on the shoulder of its neighbor. And which is critical to understand, because if you print something too often that isn't a kern, that isn't resting on its neighbor's shoulder, it will break. And what we are used to in the 21st century is what would be called horizontal kerning, just like this, like the tail of the Q nesting under the serif of the U. But in the 16th century, and well, in the 15th century, but really in the 16th century, printers and type founders not only kerned horizontally, they kerned vertically, up and down. And the Theuerdank is one of two of the most extraordinary examples of that kind of work. So just so to get that clear beforehand, the Theuerdank is the short name for a book printed for Emperor Maximilian I by Johann Schönsperger the Elder in 1517. The text of the book is an allegorical poem in which Theuerdank, Maximilian's alter ego, overcomes a series of perils en route to marry Ehrenreich, Maximilian's fictionalized character for Mary of Burgundy. Now, the book was produced by a cadre of artists working in Maximilian's court. One of the things that differentiated Maximilian from other Roman emperors is he didn't have much money. And so rather than building palaces with frescoes and paintings and sculptures, he was the first person of his stature to fully embrace printing because he could afford it. And he sponsored, among other things, the most remarkable woodcut probably ever produced, Albrecht Dürer's Triumphal Arch. And he also sponsored the making of this book, which in the, sort of visual-oriented world in which we live is most known for its 118 remarkable woodcuts. But in the specialized world that I live in, it is most known for its remarkable typeface, which is based on the calligraphy of Maximilian's court calligrapher, Vincenz Röckner. And so this innovative typeface combines a large complement of alternate characters with a set of calligraphic flourishes that can either work on their own or be used in combination with letterforms to create alternate ascending and descending finials. And I'll explain what all that means. So this is the recto and verso of folio 79 from the Theuerdank. And as you can see, the typeface seems capable of near limitless variation. And at first glance, by design, it looks more like calligraphy than it does like type. And so all of the analysis that I'm doing tonight is from this single folio of the book. It applies for the whole book, but this happens to be the one folio that I own. So, and here's a close-up of the type to give you a better sense of what it's like on the page. And it has all kinds of, apart from the calligraphic flourishes that you see, it has like, this is carried over from the manuscript era, a sort of line, a notation of a line beginning or a couplet beginning. And you have all kinds of crazy things like that, these combinations of letters. But when you Google Theuerdank type, this is what comes up on Wikipedia. And most illustrations of the Theuerdank type are similar to this. And it is indeed, a huge set of characters. There are 9 capital E's and 7 capital M's. But there's a very noted discrepancy between this alphabet and the one that appears on the printed page of the Theuerdank. So for one of the most diverse characters in the book, the lowercase g, this character set shows only 2 variants, while among the 36 G's on folio 79, there are no fewer than 7 distinct forms. And here are the 36 G's arranged in order of their appearance and designated as recto or verso and the line number that they're on. But this is maybe a little more helpful. Here they are grouped by design and designated as G1 through G7. Now, of the seven different G forms, one is used 14 times, 1, 9, 1, 5, 2, 3, and 2 are used only once. And the most frequently of these G's, what I call G1, is distinct from all others in not only its descending finial, but also in its bold, which is different from all the other G's. And you can see that here. And so G1 has this little pen mark jutting out from its bowl here, which is absent on G2 and all other G's. And on all the other G's, the bowl is interchangeable with the one on G2. Let's see, where am I? But what's unlike G2, however, G's 3 through 7 show signs of stress in roughly the same area, where the X height meets the descender of the character, as if the bowl had been fused in some way with alternate descenders. Now, one possible explanation for these stress points is that the matrix for these letters was actually created using 2 separate punches, one for the bowl and another for the descender. And so what that would mean is the way a type was made is you carve a letter in a steel punch, strike it into a brass matrix, copper or brass matrix, and then cast a piece of metal type from that. And so what you could conceivably do is cut 1 punch for this form and 1 punch for the for different descenders, and try to strike the matrix twice. Good luck with that. It would be very hard. But even what would it be certain about that? If you were to do that, the area of stress would always be in the same place because the bowl would end in the same place. But on all of these G's, although the stress point is in roughly the same area, it's in a different place. And so further examination of other flourished letter forms reveals similar stress points in the B, H, and L. And here you get a little insight into how this typeface works, because this descending finial isn't connected. It doesn't align with its character. If we zoom out to the macro view, another curiosity of the Theuerdank's pages is a series of seemingly free-floating interlinear flourishes used as calligraphic decoration. I've got a larger slide here. These highlighted areas. And when we magnify these flourishes, oh yeah, here's the other slide. When we magnify these flourishes, we notice that they appear similar to many of the descenders used in the type, except that they have been inverted. So for instance, this form is an upside down version of this form. And so on. That is that, and that is that. Some of the flourishes seem to transgress into the area where the letter, into what we would think of as the letterforms bounding box, but most of them have a very clear line at which they cut off. And so by locating both the terminations of these flourishes and connecting them with the stress points in the composite characters, the composition of the type form becomes apparent. We now can see that the body of the type that the letter forms were cast on were one size, and the body of the type that the interlinear flourishes were cast on was a slightly smaller size. And if we then place rectangles over certain characters to approximate the dimensions of their type bodies, we see how these fit together. Now note in particular the two flourishes between the third and the fourth lines. The one on the left is inverted and used as an interlinear flourish, while the one on the right is the descender of the G. Each flourish aligns with one horizontal edge of its type body so that it can be either joined with an ascending or descending stroke or allowed to float in between the lines of type. The flourish on the left is used to different advantage in the line above, acting as an ascending finial on an H. So this is the same form, again, aligned with the letter H. And so the H gives us a sort of closer view of how this would work from the compositor's point of view, from the printer's point of view, how you would set a page of this type. And so this is what I call the native form of the H. And you can see that it has two vertical kerns, one going up and one going down. In this one, which is aligned with an ascending finial, that kern has been just chipped off clearly and aligned with this. Whereas here, the descending kern has been chipped off and misaligned in this case, but usually aligned. And one of the hints to this is that oftentimes the direction of the stroke in the letter and the flourish are not in the same line. They're not going in the same direction quite. So you also see that there are two parts. In other instances, it is the flourish rather than the letter form that vertically kerns onto the shoulder of the piece of type above or beneath it. Some of these kerns are particularly extreme, like this one, in which the flourish seems to wrap around the top of the H as if it's spooning it almost. When on the right, it's been connected with the foot of the lowercase n. So this approach to making alternate characters is interesting for a number of reasons. By creating a stackable system of vertical kerns, the Theuerdank's type designer took full advantage of the typographic grid. Although the predominant thrust of typographic and calligraphic texts is horizontal, calligraphy is able to take advantage of vertical movement in ways that typography cannot. So in this page from Bernardino Cattaneo's writing manual from 1545, for instance, we can see how that although calligraphic lines are horizontally predominant, Cattaneo is able to breach the vertical space of adjacent lines by, he can go, his pen can go anywhere his mind can. And in addition, he can create joined characters because he's simply writing in ink on a surface. While in metal type, vertical kerning has become increasingly rare since the 16th century, and any desire to connect two letters horizontally requires the making of a separate matrix and the casting of a ligatured pair, as in the TH from Palatino italic here. So the type in the Theuerdank seeks to reclaim some of the earlier vertical flexibility of calligraphy while remaining a self-consciously typographic alphabet. It is highly variable, but it conforms nonetheless to the typographic grid. And by combining a root font of at least 156 characters with abundant flourishes, so all of these flourishes here, I think there are 70, I forget how many there are, but all of these occur simply on one page of this book. The Theuerdank artists created pages that are remarkably alert to typographic possibility while still evoking calligraphic traditions. Now, of course, there are many potential pitfalls awaiting anyone who attempts to deduce a 500-year-old manufacturing process from a printed image, not least of all the fact that the Theuerdank type was created at the behest of the Holy Roman Emperor. So, Maximilian was poor compared to other emperors, but he was a lot richer than I'll ever be. And so the resources available to him could have allowed for options that are simply above my intellectual pay grade. And, they could have potentially created a 500 character font or created some sort of means of casting that I just don't understand and that was too complicated to be continued. But I think it's likely that the compositors of the Theuerdank sat down with chisels and files and fit together these beautiful pages, working horizontally and vertically. And in fact, there's a page in the Columbia University's copy of this book in which, if you remember how I showed there were stacked, there were smaller calligraphic flourish pieces of type. There's one page in which they clearly didn't have spacing material in the line below, and one of the characters of type has dropped down into that available space. So I'm pretty sure this is how the type was made. But either way, the Theuerdank is not simply the product of deep pockets and idle wealth. It is also the result of a refined aesthetic vision that was matched with the craftsman capable of seeing that vision through. It is this quality that makes the Theuerdank interesting as a model of contemporary private press printers. As commercial book production moved increasingly toward formal homogeneity in the 16th century, the Theuerdank distinguished itself by remaining above the commercial fray and creating a highly individual private typography. Inasmuch as Aldus Manutius created the gold standard of commercial book production, the Theuerdank provides us with an equivalent standard for the private press. And in doing so, they created the first modular typeface. And so if you were here in person or if you come and visit the Center for Book Arts while Kelly Anderson's exhibit is up, she has an entire section on modular typefaces, like designed by Josef Albers and all kinds of fascinating sort of modernist experiments in combination or modular typefaces. Well, this is where they all began, and which is just super cool. I mean, it's just amazing. But what is further cool, what is even more cool about the present age is that we can all now make type as if we were the Holy Roman Emperor. The visual effects of the Theuerdank type are easily reproduced in with digital tools. And at a time when digital type designers are legitimately questioning the assumptions of the metal type era, the Theuerdank stands out as a model for subverting preconceptions and pushing the limits of what is possible, with the added benefit, of course, of making a beautiful book. What the deep pockets of the Emperor Maximilian could make possible for metal type, the weightless agility of digital drafting tools make possible for our type. All we need to do is to approach the typographic grid as a field of possibility rather than a warren of impassable borders. Thank you.
I feel like we have time for questions.
I feel like we do. Any questions? Yes.
Did you notice any trends on what kind of colors in the portraits?
Well, yeah, I mean, they generally any letter that you would think of as already having an ascender or a descender, such as the H, the G, the L, the B, but then they also have those crazy lowercase n's where you wouldn't think of at all, you know. Excuse me. What's interesting about what's so difficult about script types or trying to imitate calligraphy with type is that eventually you run out of options. No matter how many options you make, you either run out of them or you have bored workers who are like, why are they making me do this? And so they just use this, they do the same thing over and over again. What's remarkable about the Theuerdank is they either, the workers were either paid or were in fear of their life or both, so that they just paid more attention. And I think that has a lot to do with the printer Johann Schönsperger the Elder, who did a lot of firsts in the world of printing because he dealt with you know, Gothic typefaces. He's been largely ignored by the 20th century typographic canon, which thinks, you know, German bad, Italian good, you know, basically that sums up the 20th century literature pretty well. And but Schönsperger printed the first lace pattern book. He printed quite a number of things and was very inventive alphabetically. So I think his workshop was sort of, you know, keenly attuned to be able to produce this work. And so there are all kinds, in answer to your question, typically they're the ascending and descending letters, but there are all kinds of unexpected things. There's this one, I don't know if I can go back. I mean, this thing, you know, it's just, it just like every once in a while tucks it over a letter, which was a calligraphic form, you know, and it makes no sense why it would be there, except one, it's interesting. Two, at the time it was beautiful. Three, the emperor wanted it there. And four, you could do it, you know, so why not? And yeah, but doing things like this, like, I mean, these guys were crazy, yeah, and talented, crazy talented. So, any other questions?
I'm glad that you pointed at that particular square because I was curious if you had theories as to how they did that, or if this is like where they made a break up higher and, you know.
Wait, this one or this
that one? Yeah,
this one?
It's crossing through.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
other like that.
Yeah, the well, this form, this piece of type ordinarily in the book ends right about there. And so I think they chipped a little piece off of it, and then they made this S. But one of the things, and so this is actually a piece of type, one contiguous piece of type, or there's a stress point there, and so this could be also a flourish. But one of the things that you notice, for instance, here, it's clear that the metal that they were using was very soft, because oftentimes, like this shape here, let me see if I can. find it elsewhere. I've seen it in other pages of the book. Well, here, yeah. I guess it has a little bit of a flattening there, but I feel like these kerns were actually able to be pushed a little bit and molded a little bit to fit around things. And so all kinds of, whether this, now that I see that point, I would say this is 3 pieces of type, yeah. Thank you. Any other questions?
Are you working on making digital versions of these calligraphic types?
No, but I'm trying to figure out how I've been trying to figure out how to make a type that would be both vertical and horizontal. Some of my favorite scripts, there are a lot of Islamic scripts that work that way. Armenian lowercase to a certain degree, and but I haven't been able to, I don't want to just make some historical reproduction. I want to make it work. And so in one book that I made, I did some character traits, I did some experiments with it, but I still haven't worked out how I would do it in a way that isn't just either a design experiment or a gimmick, and that might be because I just haven't found the right text either for it. But when I look at Islamic manuscripts and the, especially, I think, I want to make something that feels like that, but doesn't just feel like some wonky Latinized, Islam, Arabic or something like that.
Some of those scripts get so drawn.
Yeah.
That they're almost unintelligible.
Yeah.
Like the regular form.
Yeah, a page will have like 4 lines of 6 characters, and it'll be that big, and but yeah, it's been a challenge, I mean, it's as I said, it's like we need to look beyond the typographic grid, but I was raised on the typographic grid. I have an appreciation for people who do it and a desire to see it done, but I have a very hard time doing it myself. Yeah.
Well, type is resistant to it.
Well, metal type is, yeah, certainly, but since I do most of my type design digitally, but I've got to have a reason for it.
When you're figuring out how to do it, basically.
Oh yeah, I could definitely make it easily. It's so easy. I mean, designing type on the computer is just ridiculously easy, and or designing good type on the computer is incredibly hard. But but making a typeface like this would be very simple on the computer. Yeah. So. Any other questions?
So all the metal for that is gone.
Yeah, long
What we're
gone.
looking at is
So
folios.
yeah. So there is very little original in Antwerp at the Plant and Mauritius Museum. There's still a significant amount of 16th century original 16th century typographic material, but none of, well, I shouldn't say none of because I don't know, but very little of it, if any, is the actual type, because type metal is meant to be melted back down and reused. And I think especially when you're doing something for the Holy Roman Emperor, it's his, and you don't go using it. There were successive editions of the Theuerdank printed, not in this typeface. So I think while Maximilian thought it was worth it, successive publishers were like, I think we'll just, go the simple traditional route. The only other book I've seen like this is was printed by the writing master Urban Wies about 40 or 50 years later. And he made a similarly constructed two typefaces constructed similarly that he used. And it took 3 of us at the Newberry Library about 4 hours to break it apart into pieces, because at first it was just like, there's no way this could be typed. And he was actually more obsessive. He didn't miss any joins. They were all spot on. But yeah, but apart from those 2 examples, I've never seen any other type like it. So yeah, I think in German, these the parts, the flourishes when they're just floating alone are called schnorkels. Yeah, and but anyway.
Does anyone have? I have one.
Okay.
Last question. I'd like
Okay.
to ask, which is, what do you think contemporary type designers could learn from looking at typography like this? What's the lesson that you think is most interesting today?
Well, I could give a very long talk on that. The moment you endeavor to make a book, whether you realize it or not, you are stepping into a multi-millennial history of endeavor. And the more you familiarize yourself with that history, I find, the better your books are going to be. So that's one. You got to know the rules to break them, kind of thing. But the reason to look at a book like this, which to contemporary eyes is like, oh, fusty old grandpa, like, why would I want to look at that? Is because it does something that is so different, from what we expect type to do. And even though it looks, people are so put off by the appearance that they don't see the motivation behind it. And so it's easier to look at Alber's combination type than this, when, you can't do shit with, with Alber's type other than, a few words or make a poster. This, you can make a book. And so the benefit of looking at this material is to try to see, well, what's next? If I look at both of these things and I now have these new tools that don't restrain me, where can I go with it? And I want to see where people go with that. Whereas, most digital type that's made is like, let's take the most boring qualities of metal type and amplify them and just make type that puts people to sleep, and has no variation, this is just for text faces. There are amazing things being done in contemporary type design, but in a lot of text faces. And so I'd like to see someone make a contemporary text face that somehow incorporates this and surprises us with something new. So
Thank you so much, Russell.
You're welcome.
This has been phenomenal.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So I have a copy of this book here if you'd like to take a look if you haven't seen it yet. I think this is Russell's personal copy.
It is.
So please be careful with it. But we have more of these little postcards at the front desk. So if you're interested in purchasing a copy, please keep one, because this talk that was given tonight is just a small bit of the wealth of information that's in this book.
Thanks.